Well, I'm Florence Iwegbue. I am a mother of three. I have a special needs child, and I run Livewello, which is a software platform that allows people to use their genetic information to optimize their health, to reverse some chronic health issues, and to build good habits around their lifestyle. Unfortunately, I was in the legal field, and the company was built out of a lot of tragic events that occurred in my family. I lost my mother prematurely at 58 to adult onset epilepsy and the myriad of other chronic health issues that seemed to drop on her lap over 23 years ago. We talk about burnout now. 23 years ago, this was not part of the conversation. We talk about perimenopause, menopause. 23 years ago, nobody was talking about these conversations openly. Stress on Black women that live in diaspora and work in the professional field, mental health, none of it was being discussed. So when I switched off my mom's life support machine at Royal Free Hospital here in London, I am also a UK citizen as well as a US citizen. Um, it probably took a part of me. She took a part of me away with her. I crumbled, and the only thing that kept me going was having my children. Of course, 3 years later, my son was diagnosed with epilepsy as well. As you can imagine, I thought things were bad. They went worse. I could not believe that this disease would come back to haunt me. I quit my career and I became determined that I was going to face epilepsy head on in my son. I was not prepared to lose a child to this disease. Incidentally, I am married to Dr. Iwegbue, who is a physician and a physician at the very same hospital, Children's Hospital, a tandem hospital that he worked in. So he had a lot of colleagues in the field, and we would say that access to health was somewhat different for us because of his professional capacity. Long story short, our son was also diagnosed with autism, but in our minds, epilepsy was more urgent than autism. And we set out to figure out what to do. I did not understand. This was my biggest question as a non-health professional. I did not understand why it was that my mom had this disease that crept up late in her life. None of her children had the disease. Nobody else in the family had had the disease. And somehow her grandchild, who she never met, had the disease. And he had it as a child. So that was how I fell into the world of nutrigenomics, epigenetics, and I learned that just because you can fly 7 hours from West Africa as an immigrant or 10 hours from the Caribbean as an immigrant into the UK does not mean that you can immediately start leading a lifestyle akin to those in your new home, wherever you are in diaspora. Apparently, we are not evolved enough to live the life that we lead now. Every single one of us walks around with genetic advantages and disadvantages. And based on how you lead your life, you can switch on and switch off genes. So I embarked upon this journey to mimic a lifestyle to akin to that of our ancestry, to see if that would affect our son in a positive way or improve his health. Lo and behold, 3 years on into what became probably the most stressful few years of my own life, we were able to reverse it. He lost the diagnosis in the sense that he no longer had grand mal seizures like he was having. He was no longer on the medication that my mother was on when she passed away. She was taking it diligently. She was also a nurse, by the way. I failed to mention that. And that same medication was also causing a lot of skills to be lost in our son, which was also a mystery to me, because if this is a medication in the market, why was it affecting our son so adversely? So we built this company. We built this company because I learned, and Sonia and I were talking about this earlier. And I'm part of the generation, as with many people here, who we were grown when the internet was introduced to us, and a lot of us would do our research on the internet. We were a little bit, suspicious of it, as we all are, but we did our research mostly on the internet, reading a myriad of papers. And that was how I learned that if you did your genetic test results, you can find out through these myriad of chemical pathways that we all have in our bodies, where your disadvantages are and things you can start to do to improve your lifestyle and ultimately appease any kind of chronic health conditions or symptoms that you're having. With my success with our son, we built this company and we continued helping people. It was an arduous task because our users, where a lot of the information we would give them on their genetics came with research papers backing it. And it involved this rigorous task of reading all those papers manually. And I was motivated because of my son and my experience, but I didn't necessarily expect that the average person would be quite as motivated. In trying to figure out how we could position our company to be more useful to users, I fell ill. I gained 88 pounds. I developed 13 uterine fibroids. I had chronic fatigue syndrome. I had fibromyalgia. I had major depressive disorder. And I was bedbound for 2 years. And then in another 2 years, I was bedbound. I was in a pretty horrific situation. And it dawned on me that in Chinese medicine, there is this adage about the most dangerous era in a woman's life is between the age of 45 and 60. It's been in Chinese, traditional Chinese medicine, for hundreds of years. But research is now showing that that is when women lose their lives, they lose relationships, even some get incarcerated, and they fall victim to more grievous mental health conditions. And so I became a statistic, even though I was the co-founder of a health and wellness company. I was not living what my company was preaching. As I was trying to figure out how to address my health issues, AI fell into the market and became released. What I haven't shared with you is that my husband, not only being a physician, because he watched how we reversed our son's health condition, and it did not really involve any traditional Western medicine approaches. He went on to study how to write programs, and he single-handedly built Livewello himself. So he self-taught himself how to write software, and he built the software. And we built the software really for our son. But then we found that a lot of people who have different medical or chronic health issues needed it. And that's why we put it out there. So when AI hit the market, it hit the market for mostly a lot of programmers back in 2021, 2022. And he jumped on it. And the reason why he jumped on it was because of that one complaint that we were getting, which was, yes, we know the evidence is there, but the motivation to read this research and use the information to start addressing our issues, that was one problem, is not there. The second problem is adherence to a lot of the advice that we all know about the best thing to do for our health. So that's we set about to do it. And in 2023, we actually won an award at Health Unity at Stanford University because we built the software to where you can now have a conversation with your own genetics. So you can have an everyday conversation with your genetics based on whatever chronic health issue you're having. And you can set goals and set an accountability tool up so that you can adhere to whatever goals are amenable to your own health condition. And this is where we are. I set about using it for myself. You know, we all hear about the cobbler's shoes, and yeah, I was not in a great shape. I couldn't even afford the 6 weeks off it took to recover from fibroid surgery. So it was really important that I started working on my health. Incidentally, in the process, as it happens, I lost my father. I was also taking care of him. So I was going back and forth to Nigeria. And in one of my many trips to Nigeria, I would go to the village. And what I was observing in the village was that a lot of women my age did not look like me. And these were poor women, by the way. When I say poor, I'm talking in financially. I was noticing that I was looking more like women in their 70s in my village. And even my own children mistook some of the women that we were interacting with as being my age mate. And age is a very important thing in our culture. So we show a lot of deference to people who are older. And they have to learn to realize this person is this age and that person that age. And what I did was I put my Apple Watch on their hands because a couple of things became obvious. A lot of them did not know what a hot flash was. And this is what I was chronically and having. They seemed very, very joyful, full of smiles. They seemed also very agile. I'm talking about women in their 70s. So I put a watch on them and I noticed that they were averaging 20 to 21,000 steps per day. Their heart rate was pretty high on average per day. There was a lot of time spent communing, talking, laughing. So I went back to the AI and I questioned it. I said, what is it about the way that these people are leading their lives that is correlating with the way they look and with the way they feel? And I'm talking mental health. And that is when it became obvious that based on my genetic disposition as a sub-Saharan African, I needed to hyper-focus on movement. I needed to hyper-focus on reducing cortisol in my body, which is stress. And as a Black woman in diaspora, that is the most urgent health issue that we have. It is the stress. And I also needed to focus on food, but not as aggressively as I was made to believe. And that's when I started the journey in 2022. I started it very slowly with 60 seconds of meditation and 5 minutes of exercise per day. I still have 5 minutes of exercise as my goal on my watch because it keeps me humble. And I started to eat 70% of my diet as sub-Saharan African, which is deep greens, high chlorophyll vegetables. So lettuce doesn't have the same effect on us as it would have on a Caucasian. Lettuce does nothing for us. So I eat deep green vegetables. I eat what they call complex carbohydrates, deep-rooted carbohydrates, yams, cassavas. And I eat oily fish because that is where a lot of the vitamin A for my mental health is deposited in a lot of oily fish. And I eat a lot of beans because that's a huge source of protein for people, for sub-Saharans. And without really focusing heavily on my diet, I don't do dairy. But that's about as strict as I am. I really don't believe that when I feel that the effect of stressing over what we eat has a negative effect. And so I tend not to hyper focus on that. What I hyper focus on is meditation and movement. And those were the two things that I observed the most in these women. And it's been about 3.5 years of me following this lifestyle regimen and staying accountable to myself on my software. And I managed to take off the weight. I managed to build muscle to support myself. I work out very, very differently than what standard advice is given. The standard advice in the West is, I think, 3 to 4 times a week, half an hour to 45 minutes. I don't do that because what I observed and what research shows is that specifically for sub-Saharan Africans, we need an hour per day of 70% of your maximum heart rate. And if you're over 40, you absolutely need some sort of mobility or agility movement in addition. And that is either things like yoga, capoeira, Zumba, Pilates, um, bar, which is kind of like ballet. But you need that because you are not working out to look good. You are working out so that when you're in your 70s and 80s and you're out in the snow, or you have to put on your own pants or your own jacket, you can do it independently. And God knows, as a parent of Gen Z children, I am not really dependent on them as my father was on us, to take care of us. If any of us here are parents, you will understand they're built different. They are not built like us. So the idea of caring for an older parent is not something in the repertoire that I would expect of my children. And so that's what I do. I work out for longevity. Longevity is now my goal. Having a child with special needs, I want to live to 100. I want to do it in a dignified way, like my husband's sensei, who is 95 years old and still travels by himself and teaches people. I believe it can be done. And I believe that mental health is at the core of physical health. And this is where I am now. I had to change my mindset about the word busy. I had to shift around what was important and what was not. And I had to do something called tagging, habit tagging. Um, so one of the first things I learned that I cannot leave my house unless I have meditated. So I put meditation at the top of my priority. It's amazing how when you change around what you prioritize, you start to make time for it. It's kind of like clothing and food. I prioritize the quality of my food over the quality of my clothing. And I know that's a lot for some people to take in, but it took me hitting rock bottom to make peace with that. That the quality of my food, the bulk of what I earn has to go into high quality food as opposed to clothing. Um, I also had to do something called a titration of my habit because I was busy. And suddenly changing somebody's mentality is not that easy. Minutes of exercise per day. And I increased it slowly to 46 minutes, which is where I am right now. It took me 3 years, Sonia, to get to that point. So this is not something that can happen quickly. Just like excess weight that I had, I didn't lose it in 90 days. It took me 3.5 years. It was a very slow process. And what I learned was that when you need something to have substantial impact, it has to be done slowly. So to build that habit of just 60 seconds for 5 minutes, it took me 90 days. So the accountability coach, you start to do this for 90 days. If you miss a day, you reset the clock. You set the AI to do that. And here's the thing about failure, what I learned about failure. The fact that I failed so many times is actually what ended up helping me to be successful, because I had to reset the clock so many times that it became more of a habit for me. I don't know if I'm making any sense. Yeah. How I was able to figure my way through that was that when I was doing the meditation, in order to keep my mind from racing and from traveling all over the place, I started learning about breathing for lowering cortisol, which is one of the biggest demons in terms of middle age for us women, and breathing for reducing anxiety, sudden anxiety attack, breathing to suppress anger. And there is something called intermittent hypoxia breathing, which is what I used because of the chronic health issues I had with fibroids. I mean, that was keeping me bedbound, and having all these issues with anemia, that was keeping me bedbound. So if you go to meditate, think about it as a breathing session, a healing breathing session. And if you do a breathing of 6 seconds in and 6 seconds out, you can only have to do a total of, I think, 5 breaths to get to 60 seconds. If you decide to do 4, 7, 8 breathing, you add up 4, 7, and 8. To do 60 seconds is only, you can set that to do it 3 times a day. Work on the train back and first thing in the morning. So these are just little tricks that I use because of, caring for a family, caring for a special needs son, running a business. You do run crazy when it comes to being busy. So these are just some of the things. And the mentality is you start very, very slowly. You cannot throw too many things at yourself. This is so imperative. You absolutely have to start low and slow, and do not stress, and set a goal. Set a goal for what you want to feel like and what you want to look like. And if you set that goal, make that goal vision. And it's okay to set goals that do not seem realistic. At 52, I was able to achieve my goal. When I ran a test, I have the fitness. My goal, actually, I'll go ahead and say it. It was a young girl who was a sprinter for the US, and she lost her mother tragically and suddenly right before she won her very first 200 meters. Sha'Carri Jackson, I'm sure some of you, Sha'Carri Richardson, I'm sorry. Some of you remember her. And she, her personal life is not perfect, but her attitude towards training and her discipline was bar none. Herself and Serena Williams became the 2 pictures that I superimposed my own face on as a goal that I wanted to set for myself. Right. I just want to emphasize how important it is to have a visual goal that runs in your head consistently. And what I found out is nobody, no matter how much your husband loves you, your boyfriend, nobody can love you as much as yourself. And you absolutely have to prioritize yourself. Yeah. I was so frustrated with perimenopause and uterine fibroids. And of course, my sister-in-law got diagnosed with PCOS. And here's one of the questions, because you said you just have to know what to ask. And here's one of the frustrating questions I asked we have one interface in our software was, what do I need to do to go back to feeling normal again? That was literally a desperate question that I asked. And stop feeling depressed, the hormonal fluctuations. And I learned that hormones are created in various parts of our body. We have this thing called fascia. We have this thing called muscles. We have our gut. I didn't know all this stuff. I thought everything was in the brain or in some special spot that only doctors knew about. I didn't know that if I jumped on my, bounced on my feet 100 times, I could go from feeling despondent to feeling encouraged. Just jumping on my feet 100 times. I didn't know all this. Nobody ever told me this. I didn't know that just being able to go on my tippy toes could improve my facial bone structure. I have changed the fascia of my body to where my face looks different. It doesn't look the way it used to look 4 years ago. And I asked, what is that about? Apparently, if the ballet, a lot of these people that do ballet have incredible fascia. The fascia, FASCIA, go research it, is such a primal source of our physical health, just as important as our muscle. It wraps around our muscles. And if there's certain exercises that you do that trains your fascia, and if you can get your fascia in a primal position, it can mediate any hormonal imbalances that you have, any adrenal issues, any brain chemicals that you're lacking to make you happy, and your basic ability to stay balanced, just balanced on your feet. If you exercise, you'll be able to achieve this. I didn't know all this. Nobody ever told me all this stuff, and it was just fascinating to learn it. And so, just getting in that conversation with AI can reveal so much about yourself and how you can help yourself. The way I argued with mine, because being of African descent, exercise, I was never raised with a culture of exercise, and I never exercised until 2022. I'm just going to make that admission here. And so what I liked to do was to dance, because, you go to parties and you dance. And what I told my AI when I was building a profile based on my genetic profile, trying to build a plan for myself, I was trying to plan, because just like Savage said, you have to strategize. You can't react. You have to strategize.
That's right.
So I was trying to build a plan for how I was going to get healthy. And my thing was, the only thing I loved doing was dance. So it suggested Zumba. So I did Zumba for 90 days, every single day. I loved it. And then he told me that Zumba alone was not going to get me to where I wanted to be. It was not going to help me build muscle. It was not going to help me build strength. And it was going to keep me at a place where I was going to stop losing weight. And that just did not correlate with me. I basically said, it's a lie. Zumba is exercise and people lose weight. He said the top people that teach Zumba do not exercise on Zumba alone. They do conditioning. And the conditioning exercises is what my specific genetics needed, especially as a sub-Saharan. So high interval intensity exercises.
Yeah.
Yes. And then I needed it because it would increase my level of fitness. And it was in the process of increasing my level of fitness that I would start to build muscle. I would start to harness the effects of the good hormones and chemicals coming out of my body, and I would start to lose weight. I just want to say it's just been an honor to be in the company of such great people and amazing innovators. Anybody who attended this seminar, consider yourself an innovator. early adopter, you're curious, and that's all it takes. I think that the world is changing. When it comes to AI, things are changing. They're not the way that we used to be. Financial acumen is not going to be as important as the state of your health. So this is in the world, what AI is teaching us is that at this point, I need you to start thinking about your health. I need you to start thinking about how you can improve your quality of life. I need you to start thinking about what you like to do and start making that a good 20 to 30% of your daily life. I need you to start thinking about elevating your mental health, no matter how great it is. It can always be better. Health, and wellness is where my heart and my soul is, and it is what I would advocate. If you're taking any medications, any supplements, start thinking about the fact that medications and supplements are not made for everybody. Your genetics dictates how your liver processes medications, supplements, and food. The state of your liver is dictated by your genetic profile. And so you can have a brother and a sister who have this, so two sisters who have the same health issues does not mean that they should be taking the same medication at the same dosage. This is very crucial. Your liver processes in 3 different ways: basic, intermediate, and fast. And based on the medication, it differs for everybody. So, all in all, everybody walking this earth needs to know the genetic profile. You need to be able to go to your genetic profile and say, my doctor is prescribing so and so blood pressure medicine, diabetes medicine, cholesterol medicine. Based on my genetic profile, what is the appropriate dosage for me? Because you and your sister really do not have the same genetic profile. This is the lesson I learned from my mom's passing, and this is just my big takeaway for today. Know any health providers who can benefit from helping their patients using our software? Let me know. I will be happy to train them, because this is about improving the quality of care that they already give the patient and making the results happen faster.